This week on the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly from San Francisco to South Africa, this week's show brings you powerful stories of labor resistance, solidarity, and organizing across borders. First up, WorkWeek Radio takes us to a San Francisco ICE rally demanding the release of detained student activist Mahmoud Khalil.
It's the most American thing you can do to stand up for free speech and rights for all.
Work Stoppage rounds up headlines from workers organizing at PetSmart, Kroger, the Port of Casablanca, and more.
I felt that it was worth noting that even the business owners are pissed off at racist state attacks on their workforce, even if only because it disrupts their business model.
On Union Talk, AFT President Randi Weingarten joins 3 professors and union leaders to expose Trump's assault on higher ed and what it means for academic freedom and student rights.
Columbia has been the site of many student protests over decades now, and yet it has never seen really what we've seen over the last couple of years, which is a locked campus that's hard to get in and out of, that's now completely closed off to community members.
BCTGM Voices highlights union-made sugar from beets, with 2 local union presidents in Idaho sharing what union contracts mean to their work and their families.
We put it into a big drum with hot, dry air through it and start drying the granulated sugar out, and then put it into silos, package it up, and sell it out to our consumers, whether it's in small sugar packets or 1 pound, 2 pound bags.
Tales from the Reuther Library features Dr. Justine Modica on the Seattle-based Worthy Wages childcare movement.
There's this fear about hiring undocumented workers, largely from Latin America. But then Congress creates this alternative program where you can hire white European women from Norway, et cetera, right? And still pay them less than minimum wage, because you can pay minimum wage minus a 40% deduction for room and board.
And in Bua Basabetsi from South Africa, Mos Manganye remembers the massive May Day streak of 1986 in apartheid South Africa, a turning point for worker power.
I worked for 5 years. There was no union at that time. Okay? And we have problems with management, whatever. Then they were really abusing us. So let me put it that way. Then I resigned.
And finally, on this week's Shows You Should Know, Harold Phillips brings us a special spotlight on Building Trades podcast, featuring new voices from the United Association, Laborers International, and more. Plus stories from firefighters and educators pushing back on anti-worker policies. I'm Chris Garlock, and that's all coming up on this week's edition of the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly. Here's the show.
This is WorkWeek with Steve Zeltzer. First, we hear from a rally that was held at San Francisco ICE to demand the release of Mahmoud Khalil and other students and workers who have been seized by ICE raids in targeting political activists. The rally took place on April 14th.
Can you talk about why you're here today?
It's the most American thing you can do to stand up for free speech and rights for all, especially people who are here legally in this country. It's the most American thing you can do. Freedom of speech.
Why are they doing this?
Because people who are legally here in the country have been detained without sufficient reason just for speaking out.
Thank you. What's your name?
My name is Elizabeth Farinella.
You're talking about why you're here today.
I find it an abomination that people are being deported over their right to protest the criminal actions of what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank.
What can people do about it?
They can be here, they can let people know. It seems to matter to have more and more and more people protest. It also helps to have ACLU and other attorneys supporting legal action against this, and for people to stand up and support and protect their neighbors.
I am Jennifer. I'm an alum and retiree from the University of California, Berkeley. We fight for freedom of speech. That's what we're all about. I'm out on the street because this poor person is being persecuted because he took advantage of the United States given right of freedom of speech. He's a green card holder. He should not be taken. None of the people who are being taken right now should be taken, and we need to be here for our rights, to fight for our rights.
I'm here today because there are a lot of very disturbing, lawless activities that our federal government is undertaking, cracking down. I mean, Mahmoud Khalil is the focal point of this today. And he was a lawful resident, and as a student he exercised his First Amendment rights, and because of that the federal government has yanked his permission to be in the U.S. And they are trying to deport him. And I believe that non-citizens, which he is, have free speech rights just like citizens do.
I'm here to be a witness to the fact that we're not going to allow our government to do stuff like this.
Yeah, we're here to fight for the freedom of Mahmoud Khalil and all of those who have been detained by ICE and the Department of Homeland Security as a part of the federal government's attack on free speech. We call for workers' action to fight against these deportations, to fight against the revocation of student visas.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome to Work Stoppage, folks, your favorite gratitude podcast. We are out here. We are thankful. We are too blessed to be stressed.
We are in our lane. We are moisturized. We are flourishing. So immigrant workers have always faced repression in this country, but the various criminal enterprises known as immigration enforcement agencies have continued to ramp up their racist crusade even further under the Trump administration. And we saw this on April 21st when 8 farm workers in Vermont were detained by armed Border Patrol agents. And all of those workers are now at risk of deportation after making their way to Vermont to commit the apparently criminal offense of working a job that feeds the fucking state. So, according to a spokesperson for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, as reported by VermontPublic.org, agents drove to the farm after hearing from a quote-unquote concerned citizen, a racist, probably a police officer, who said that they saw 2 people carrying backpacks exiting a wooded area and crossing onto a farm's property, which is about 2.5 miles from the Canadian border. The spokesperson from Customs and Border Protection said that one of those individuals fled and that during the agents' pursuit of that individual, they, quote, located and apprehended additional individuals determined to be illegally present in the United States, end quote. And every single element of that story sounds so fucking fake on its face, and there's literally not one part that can be corroborated or verified in any way. A leader from the migrant justice organization, whose name is Christian Santos, said, quote, what happened Monday night was an injustice. Dairy workers were arrested by Border Patrol in their own homes, a violation of their human rights. We work hard to support the economy of this state, working long hours for low wages, doing work that U.S. citizens don't want to do. Remember, the cows don't milk themselves. We demand freedom for our fellow community members and won't rest until they are free. End quote. The cows don't milk themselves, indeed. The fucking sweet potatoes don't fucking pick themselves. None of this shit just pops out of the ground and ends up in your grocery store.
You know, we talked about the attacks on the workers in New Bedford, where there had been worker organizing in the seafood industry. We know there's agricultural organizing going on. Maybe not, I don't know, at this farm, but in this area. So, like, that it just like time and again the resolution for those contradictions seems to be target the repression at the workplaces that they think might, you know, be organized or where people might stand up for themselves.
Speaking to the Burlington Free Press, a 5th-generation dairy farmer, Dustin Makia, said, quote, I'm very worried about it. It's not sustainable to not have migrant farm workers. Farming would be very bleak and the cost would skyrocket in the grocery store because you can't pay an American to do this job anymore. Americans just don't want to do this job. Without the foreign labor, it's just not sustainable. End quote. And when I read that, I thought to myself, The fact that an industry like this is not sustainable without the hyper-exploitation of immigrant laborers should raise probably much broader concerns about the way that agricultural production is structured in the United States, but I felt that it was worth noting that even the business owners are pissed off at racist state attacks on their workforce, even if only because it disrupts their business model.
As always, labor peace is not in our interest, and solidarity forever.
Welcome to Union Talk. I'm Randi Weingarten. Welcome to another episode of Union Talk. I'm Randi Weingarten, and on this episode, we are taking on one of the many wars that Donald Trump is engaged in, the war on knowledge, the war on higher education, the war on America's universities and colleges. I want to introduce you to the three amazing educators that are with me today. Todd Wolfson, who is the president of our affiliate, the American Association of University Professors. Katie Rogers, a continuing lecturer at UC Davis and the president of UC AFT. And Marcel Aguiros, a professor in the Department of Astronomy at Columbia University.
To follow up on Todd's point, we've seen over the last 20 years, really since 9/11, the criminalization of protest and of dissent. And a lot of what happened at Columbia last year, and really in response to student encampments and student protests against the war in Gaza, I think illustrate this idea that we no longer see student protests as an essential piece of democracy. One of the ways in which we're reminded by the youth of positions that we accept, those of us who are older just kind of tolerate. And so this is all a long way of saying that in practice, it would be hard for me to bring you into Columbia's campus because we've been locked down for the better part of 2 years now, which is an unheard of situation in our history. And as you know, of course, Columbia has been the site of many student protests over decades now, and yet it has never seen really what we've seen over the last couple of years, which is a locked campus that's hard to get in and out of, that's now completely closed off to community members, where it's not self-evident that you can bring someone. My kids used to play around on campus. That's gone. It used to be a meeting place for people in the community. That's gone.
You have to have a pass, right, to get onto campus now, right?
That's right. You have to get a QR code. It has to be authorized. It's a complicated process that's shut down all kinds of public outreach activities, including bringing in high school students and elementary school. I mean, we used to have all the daycares used to use our green spaces, for example. That's all done. So it's a very bizarre feeling right now because we feel enclosed and trapped in this campus that frankly has been assaulted from the outside. So it's a weird dynamic because at the same time we're locking people out, but the people we're preventing from coming onto campus are not the ones who are really threatening us, right? The threats are really coming from DC. They're not from people on Broadway.
Katie, how is all of this, how is the weaponization, the cutting of research and the weaponization of anti-Semitism playing itself out on the campuses as a whole?
I want to echo what Marcel was just saying. I think that there's been a chilling effect across the UC system watching what's happened at Columbia and other universities. And listening to Marcel talking about the changes to the campus, the physicality of the campus itself really resonates with me as I think about the University of California's own long, rich history of activism that has been utterly attacked in the wake of what started a year ago or more with student protests being attacked and interrogated and investigated and really undermined in terms of what student activism and university activism can look like. My union represents contingent faculty. And I've said in many places before, when you're a contingent faculty member, you already have, I think, a sort of difficult relationship with academic freedom. For example, it can be very, very hard to exercise your rights, to feel safe enough to speak up and to protest. And there is no question that a sort of extended collateral damage of everything that's happening right now is that contingent faculty across the United States, I think, are even more wary about what precarity might look like for them. And this has a deep impact on our campuses, in our classrooms.
Thank you very, very, very much. And for everybody who is listening, this is Union Talk, and this is our episode really explaining the war on higher education by Donald Trump and his administration and what we are doing to fight it. Thank you.
Welcome to the BCTGM Voices Project, a podcast highlighting the real people who make up our union. Most people believe the sugar they use and consume every day comes from sugar cane, but in the United States, about 60% of it is union-made from sugar beets in the cooler climates of the northern Midwest and western regions of the country. BCTGM members in Michigan, North Dakota, Montana, Minnesota, Idaho, and Wyoming process nearly 100% of the sugar from sugar beets for companies like Michigan Sugar, Amalgamated Sugar, Wyoming Sugar, Southern Minnesota Beet Sugar Cooperative, American Crystal, and Sydney Sugar. Much of it ends up in bags on your grocery shelves, but a lot also goes into other union-made products such as Kellogg's cereal and other sweet snacks. In this episode, we speak with two of our local union leaders in Idaho about the work they do and the importance of maintaining strong union representation in this industry.
I'm David Woods. I'm International Secretary Treasurer and also the Director of Organizing.
I'm Shaq Clark. I'm the Western Region Vice President.
Sean Fowler. I'm the President for Local 282G.
And I'm Brendan Van Sickle, Local President for 283G.
You both work for Amalgamated, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So this time of year right now, we're actually putting the sugar beet seeds in the ground. I believe we're planting close to 175,000 acres of fields between Idaho, Eastern Oregon, and Eastern Washington will be planted in for sugar beets. Once they're grown, we're a grower-owned facility, and the local farmers then process. They take the tops off, they bring the beets to the piling grounds. From the piling grounds, we transport those into our 3 beet processing facilities in Idaho, bring them in, we start washing them, getting the dirt and stuff off of them. And then we'll take the beets and we cut them into what look kind of like crinkle fries. From there, we go through and we start adding some heat to them and start juicing them out. Then we get the juice and we start filtering that juice out as well. As Dave was saying, it's not really like just kind of sifting anything out. We're actually taking a beet, which is, average size is like the size of a football, and cutting it down and juicing them out, and then taking that juice to crystallize our sugar out. Once we get the juice down, get it into the molasses form of it, we put them into centrifugals and then add steam to it, and we wash the high colored and impurity colored out, and then we make what is our white sugar, our white satin sugar. We put it into a big drum with hot dry air through it and start drying the granulated sugar out, and then put it into the silos, package it up, and sell it out to our consumers, whether it's in small sugar packets or 1 pound, 2 pound bags that the consumer buys on the shelf, all the way up to 200,000 pound rail cars that go to our bigger consumers, which we sell that to our local brothers and sisters at different bakeries and like General Mills and stuff for making our cereals, and then from there it comes to the shelf, whether it's as a final product that we buy on the shelf with sugar in it, or it is, a packet of sugar, a bag of sugar to use at home.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate you guys doing this.
Yeah, so do I. Yep. Thank you guys. All right.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Reuther, a podcast produced DIY from the Reuther Library on the campus of Wayne State University in the heart of Detroit, Michigan. I am Dan Golodner, your host, and on today's episode, we are talking about childcare workers. Now, in 2002, I did a little research here. In 2002, the Center for the Child Care Workforce merged with the American Federation of Teachers Educational Foundation. Now, AFT had a couple child care locals going on, but it was slow going. But now they represent 80,000 workers in Head Start programs, church-based centers, and nonprofits. And in 2020, during the pandemic in California, over 45,000 home-based childcare workers voted to form the Child Care Providers United, a joint union of SEIU and AFSCME. But even with these kind of numbers, I mean, it sounds good, but it is still an industry that is hard to crack for union organizing. This industry is a tough one and has many factors that impede successful union drives, and that is why we are talking to Justine Modica. She holds a PhD in history from Stanford University and is currently a Carmen postdoc fellow in history in the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University. Justin, hello. How are you? Welcome to Tales of the Reuther.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In the 1980s, there's a couple kind of things on the federal level that are going on that really kind of lead to some transformations in this childcare landscape. One is that Congress cuts federal support for childcare. And of course, there's no federal large federal childcare program, with Head Start being probably the largest. What there is there are subsidy-based programs that are largely provided through Title 20 of the Social Security Act, and mostly for lower income families. And so Congress cuts that funding by nearly a half during the Reagan era. Mm-hmm. They also expand the dependent care tax credit, which becomes the biggest source of federal support for childcare. And historically, tax credits for childcare have tended to support wealthier families, whereas direct funding for childcare has tended to support poorer families. So this shift under Reagan is really upwardly redistributive, right?
Right.
And the other thing that happens is that there is a lot of new efforts to expand childcare provision in the private sector. So private businesses, like, for instance, these au pair agencies work with the federal government. In 1986, the federal government creates this au pair program. There's entrepreneurs throughout the country who are creating nanny schools. This whole idea, right, is partly that we need to have American women providing childcare. So there's these kind of like racialized logics that are at work with this too. And of course, for the first 10 years of the au pair program, it's only open to Western European women, right? So, and interestingly, in 1986, Congress passes the Immigration Reform and Control Act, IRCA, which not only militarizes, the border and makes it harder for folks to, it penalizes people who are seeking employment in the United States, but it also penalizes employers for hiring undocumented workers, which studies have shown it didn't actually change how much migration there was going on, but it did, in most families, private employing families didn't really get in trouble. They weren't, the primary targets of this legislation, but there's all this fear around that, right? So this fear about hiring undocumented workers, largely from Latin America, but then Congress creates this alternative program where you can hire white European women from Norway, et cetera, right? And still pay them less than minimum wage, because you can pay minimum wage minus a 40% deduction for room and board. So there's a kind of transformation of the landscape of what's available in terms of childcare along these very racial lines, right? So I think that we also get kind of a cleavage between a split where you have whiter nannies from Western Europe who have more protections on the J-1 visa, and then brown women from Latin America who are increasingly incentivized to keep, and their employers are increasingly incentivized to keep their employment as hidden away as possible.
We really appreciate you spending some time with us and explaining your article more. And of course, where's the book? Get the book out.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's really been wonderful talking with you.
Hello, I'm Tabadi Motla. Welcome to this Workers' Day special edition of Bua Basebetsi, our weekly show where we focus on your rights as a worker and bring you relevant news, views, and stories.
I love telling people stories, and the best way to do so is hearing directly from someone who was right there back in the mid-80s. In this case, veteran trade unionist Mos Manganyi. I recently spent a day with him. A bit of background on Mos. He was born in Limpopo 72 years ago, but moved to Tembisa for high school and has not left the East Rand since then. Mos's first job was as a factory worker in 1975. He was elected as a shop steward in 1984, a role he served in until 2000. He was a local chairperson in Metal Workers Union NUMSA, later becoming the Gauteng regional chairperson. And he was also part of NUMSA's Central Committee. In addition to that, Mos was the negotiator for NUMSA in the Metal Industry Bargaining Council. He was also on COSATU's Regional Executive Committee. Mos is what they call in the unions a worker leader. We're meeting at a mall in Midrand.
How are you doing? I'm well. How are you? Nice to meet you.
And now a quick coffee to plot our route for today.
So we sit here in the Wimpy. Yeah. Milan, we love music. No? I say they've got loud music. Yeah. The one I called you only. Yeah, very hot one. Yeah. Also, coffee, no milk, just black.
When did you decide you want to get involved in trade unions? Was there a moment that you thought?
That was, I'm not going to mention companies.
Okay.
Yes, I work for another company, okay, and that was around 1975 and 1976. Okay, I worked for 5 years. There was no union at that time, okay, and we have problems with management, whatever. Then they were really abusing us. Let me put it that way. Then I resigned. Then I went to another company where Reuther. The first day when I was there, somebody invited us to go a rally in Huddersfield, Katlehong. They were giving report on negotiations. At that time, I decided that's enough. Now I'm going to be a member of the union. I went back and organized all workers of the company. That's when I decided to be a union member. It was a struggle to organize because at that time, immediately became an enemy of the employer.
And they target you?
Yeah, they target you. You have to be very careful. You have to look after yourself, otherwise you won't last. I know a lot of shops that were at that time, they make big mistake and they were fired.
So we're talking about May Days. When was the first time you went to a May Day rally or Workers' Day rally?
That's 1985.
Ah.
Yeah, right in Makulo.
What do you remember of that 1985 rally?
Okay, it started in 1985, but the main event ended up in 1986. And I'll explain how. Before we have what we call build-up actions, it started local level. We'll have our own rallies and meetings here, and or even at industrial area, we call it industrial areas. We have that, emphasizing about May Day. Not only May Day, even awareness about what we need as employees. For an example, a living wage, okay, maternity leave, 40 hours a week, because we're working 45 hours that time.
That report by my colleague Charles Leonard. Thanks for listening. We are back again next week.
There's always more to hear on the Labor Radio Podcast Network. Here's Harold Phillips with more shows you should know.
Thanks, Chris. Social media guy Harold Phillips here again, folks. And look, I'm always reminding people that there are other union members besides people who work in a factory or people who work in construction. But you know what? There are union members who work in construction, or in the building trades, as we like to call them. And a lot of them have really great podcasts. So we thought that we would go ahead and put a special trades focus on this week's Shows You Should Know for the week of April 27th. First off, let's welcome a new member to the network, the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry of the United States and Canada's Pipe Up. Michelle does a deep dive into the Laborers International Union of North America, or LIUNA, and Mark interviews LIUNA Local 265 Field Representative Nikki Crenshaw on Boiling Point. Ryan talks with Foreman Bryce Hubbard about how to lead with purpose, build unshakable team culture, and turn tailboards into powerful leadership moments on the Powerline podcast. And these last two aren't focused on the building trades, but they are definitely focused on very important trades that serve the public. Isaac and Rob share upcoming changes to Portland firefighters' healthcare benefits on the PFFA pod. And Alice O'Brien walks through educators' rights, risks, and the opportunities to push back against Trump's anti-equality policies and fear tactics on the NEA's School Me. Whatever type of job you do, you know there's probably a labor radio show or podcast out there for you. And you know where to find those, right? At laborradionetwork.org. And if you want to find out what's being talked about on the latest episode of these or other labor radio shows and podcasts, be sure to follow us at Labor Radio Net on Blue Sky and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter for now. Okay, Chris, back to you. I think I'm going to take the rest of the weekend, you know, the weekend that was brought to us by the labor movement, off. Enjoy, folks.
Thank you, Harold. Hey, that's a wrap for this week's edition of the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, our roundup of some of the programs aired over the last week on more than 200 labor radio and podcast shows. They're all part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, shows that focus on working people's issues and concerns. We've got links to all the shows, laborradionetwork.org. You can also find them. Use the hashtag LaborRadioPod on X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, all that stuff. Don't forget, let us know what you think of the show. Drop us a note, info@laborradionetwork.org. You can be part of the network. You don't even need a microphone. Labor Radio Podcast Network t-shirts are available. I'm wearing one now. They're union made. You'll find them in all sizes and 2 colors at laborradionetwork.org. This podcast recorded under a SAG-AFTRA collective bargaining agreement. The Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, edited this week by Captain Swing. I produced the show, and our social media guru, always and forever, is Mr. Harold Phillips. For the Labor Radio Podcast Weekly, this has been Chris Garlock. Stay active and stay tuned to your local Labor Radio Podcast show. We will see you next week.